Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Aaron. I'm VP of Product and Solutions Marketing here at HPE Networking. Welcome to our latest installment of Self-Driving Networks, our virtual event. This one's actually really interesting because we're going to focus on specifically agentic AI and how that's used to deliver better user experiences. The lineup is awesome. I'm going to kick it off with Sylvia Hooks. We're going to talk about what it takes to build a self-driving network, what are the key pillars, and what are some of the key outcomes that are delivered to our customers and our partners. Then I got Bob Friday, our Chief AI Officer. We're going to talk about some of the data science behind it, how you collect the right data, how do you build the right models. And then lastly, I have a whole array of product leaders that are going to talk about how this is applied to various areas in your network, from the WAN to the data center to the wired edge. So stay tuned, we have a lot to cover, but it's going to be really great. Okay, let's get started. And don't tell the other guests, but this is actually usually my favorite one, because Sylvia and I, when we chat, it's always a good time. Right?
Yes, we entertain ourselves a lot.
We entertain ourselves, maybe not the audience, but we entertain ourselves, and I think that's all that matters, right? I've been around the industry for a while. I know you have too, even though you don't look like you're a day over 25.
Thank you so much.
But I know in the career of networking, right, and you've been a networking person for a bit too, is we always hear the same IT challenges, right? It's limited IT resources. Security is always a constant threat. Growing number of devices, right? But it does feel like now it's worse or more vibrant or whatever. Why is that?
I've been asking myself that question because one of my tests for all good messaging is it can't apply to the past 2 decades and also today, right? So what is different now? And I think I was talking earlier this morning, the pandemic really put us on a path to digitization if we weren't already there. But I think the whole AI movement, first LLMs and now agentic AI, has put a whole other stress on the system. And for IT ops in general, then you have also the VMware transition that's happening with licensing. So I feel like the level of complexity is at a new, it reached a tipping point where you couldn't keep doing what you were doing before. And that's because of LLMs, agentic AI.
It's funny, the level
VMs.
of simplicity and the level of complexity, AI is just shaking everything up. And
it's making it worse and better.
No, yeah, exactly, if you can do that. And it's just funny, it's just like the pace, right? It's like just, if you think back to the time when OpenAI launched to now, it's just like that pace of evolution is like literally like nothing.
Yeah, and then on top of that, there's some external things like geopolitical changes,
Sure.
war with Iran, right? Things that are putting pressure on IT that you wouldn't expect, right? The increased need for sovereignty and protecting your data and
just changing
legislation.
the game. Like, I thought 3 years ago it was like, it's all cloud. What's the answer, right? And now
Right.
it's like, no.
Much more confusing now.
On-prem's back. It's data sovereignty, and I guess we're bringing on-prem back.
Exactly.
For better, for worse. Self-driving, right? It's like, I know Juniper was using that, a good 5-10 years ago. Silver Peak was as well on the Aruba side, as well as I'm sure other vendors too. That was more deterministic self-driving, right? You detect a change in traffic, adjust your WAN route, right? This is different, right? This is more non-deterministic. In your mind, is it real?
So I think it is, and I think it's not universally real. I mean, I think about sort of the difference between driver assist and full self-driving or autonomous in cars. That wasn't real 5 years ago.
1 year. Yeah.
Right, but it's real now. We have Waymos and things like that. And with networks, I think what I remember from 5 years ago is that people didn't want autonomous actions. They didn't trust autonomous actions. There had to be a human making a decision, but they wanted the AI engines at that time, the AI ML, to make an intelligent recommendation. So what's happened now, I think, and Juniper's been at the forefront of this with Mist, is it's gotten good enough that there's a whole class of actions that need to be done autonomously in order for humans to even keep up.
Yeah, and they're trusted. It is funny you said that, because I remember the early days of Mist when we were positioning it, partners and customers are coming to us and saying, stop saying it's self-driving.
Yeah.
You're putting me out of a job. Right, and even up until a year ago, you would get that. You don't get that anymore. Right now, it's just a given that I think self-driving is here, autonomous is here. So it's like, how do I get on this train versus how do I fight this thing? Because it's in.
Right. How do I get the reins on this rather than have it run away?
Run over, run away. So in networking, when we talk about self-driving, there's kind of 3 pillars, right? The first one is all about agentic, autonomous agents really driving experiences, right? And that comes from the right data, that comes from just years of experience, the right data lake, and that's what we're going to talk about in this session when we bring on other folks. How does that translate to the rest of HPE?
So I actually really do think that Mist, Juniper, and the networking team with Aruba Central are leading the company, right? So it's not to say that everybody else is catching up, but I think that networking focus taught the whole company a lot over the years, and then more recently, last July when we acquired Juniper.
Was it just last July?
Fascinating, right? It's dog years, as they say.
Yeah.
What I've seen is that there's been a whole bunch of evolution on the cloud ops software side too. So the Morpheus software and the OpsRamp software, because those are also at inflection points. Observability is so important. The VMware migrations that are happening because of licensing costs, moving your VMs is no trivial business. So trying to automate some of that repetitive tasks. So I've seen more and more evolution in the software side, and then the hardware itself. So the compute team is making sure that their management layer that snaps into GreenLake has increasing AI insights and now agentic capabilities. Same thing on the Electra side. So I think the networking team has been on the forefront, but the rest of HPE is building that into the devices and the software. And then finally, the GreenLake intelligence that we announced last Discover Las Vegas in June 25 is a framework that allows that stuff to all talk together using MCP. So I think everybody's evolving in their domains, but then there's also some evolution that's trying to thread it all together.
And I've heard that the term agentic enterprise popping up more and more. And I mean, that's a classic example, right? To really do an agentic enterprise, you need the full stack within networking, but you need networking, compute, storage, hybrid cloud all coming together.
Yeah, your silos can't stay silos because an agentic enterprise means that decisions get made and actions are taken across the stack. So if it just applies to networking, okay, it solves a network problem, but maybe it doesn't solve the application problem or the VM problem.
Yeah, and what I've been super excited to see is the pace of integration, right? Where like Apstra OpsRamp, Apstra Morpheus, Apstra, you name it, other things coming. The BUs have really been embracing this notion of that agentic.
Especially around the data center use case, right? If you're data center admin, you need to have all these tools talking to each other to make your job easier.
Yeah. So the second pillar for us is around the infrastructure, right? We always talk about AI native infrastructure, routers, APs that were designed to stream experience data into the cloud. What are they doing on the other side of the house? Is there AI? I assume there's AI native compute, right? I mean, it's got to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just an extension of what we were just talking about, which is that there's domain managers and software on the devices themselves, but then it's all designed to feed up into a broader context, which is GreenLake, right? Yeah. So I think that the hardware stacks are increasingly bleeding into the GreenLake control plane. And that they're increasingly designing, especially security, into the devices, right? I know on the ProLiant servers, the ILO software is really next generation. Is I'm never going to be able to say this. Post-quantum cryptography.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
Right? So it's ready for that.
PQC.
Yeah, I can't say those with letters. PQC ready. So I think all of that stuff is increasingly the hardware is being built with the idea that it's going to be consumed in a much broader context.
Yeah, and then you did touch on the third pillar, which was security. For us, it's mostly about networking and security converging, unified policies. But obviously, there's a broader HPE vision, especially when it comes to resiliency and security. So why don't you chat about that a little bit?
So I think it's an interesting point because security, again, because of the geopolitical situation, it's a conversation we keep having, and it's security, if you broaden that to how do you make sure that your workloads are resilient or that your data is sovereign, that all kind of falls into the need for security. So there's data security, and we have a lot of products in Electra and also in Zerto around storage. We have products on the servers, so the data, the servers, and the network all have to participate in security in order to have the whole stack covered. So that's the way that I'm looking at it, is all those things have to have security, but then you also have to look at how do you respond quickly to ransomware, wherever that occurs, and how do people talk to each other.
Or zero trust threats, the whole...
Yes, exactly. So many threats. So that's the other thing about AI and AI agents, right, is that it's making the threats more and more intelligent.
So faster.
Our responses have to be, exactly. I just got an email that was threatening me and said it had taken over my computer and had videos of me doing various things. And I'm like, you don't know me very well. That isn't happening.
You don't know the half of it.
But so lots and lots of new attacks now.
Very cool. So we talked about pace of innovation, right? And I remember at Barcelona, we launched launched the dual boot AP. We launched autonomous actions. We launched QFX 5250, first liquid cool switch. MWC, we launched the PTX, the ultra high dense routers. A lot's happening. Discover is right around the corner. Any hints? Anything that excites you about what's coming there?
Okay.
Without giving away the farm here?
So, well, I'm going to give you themes, right?
Okay.
And I don't think these are mind-blowing themes, but they're definitely the hot themes, right? Definitely we have to take a stance on agentic AI and how you become an agentic enterprise. Definitely we have to talk to the world about our networking integration strategy and how we are approaching that and the alternatives that we're offering the customer. Yep. So I think those are two big themes that you'll hear Antonio talk about. Also some partnership announcements, et cetera. So that's all exciting. And we can't tip our hands to that. But Jeff, before we say anything else, I wanted to pause and say, it has been a busy year. And of course, we had done some discussions ahead of the close, but when I think about the level of integration and collaboration that has happened in the past not even 12 months, compared to like where Cisco and Meraki were for a decade.
We've done more in 6 months than they've done in 13 years.
But really, and I've been part of a lot of different acquisitions, but this integration, the amount of collaboration, the microservices that we've been able to extend across Central and Mist, a dual boot AP, that's incredible to me. So I just want to pause and say,
just reflect.
Yes.
Take it all in.
Even though it's us, I still think we're doing a great job.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I agree. And it's obviously the fact that from Antonio down, they've embraced the networking, the self-driving vision, and Rami again trying to bring everyone together, and bringing data center and data science teams and engineering teams together. It means we're just innovating that much faster.
And let me ask you a question for a second. Where do you think that Rami and the rest of the networking BU, where is the biggest opportunity and excitement about how networking can participate in the other parts of HPE?
Yeah, so we talked a little about security, so I think that's a big one we talked about. But the other one that you touched on is the AI data center, right? I mean, it's just, that is everyone when they talked about the acquisition is how do you become number one in wireless when you bring Aruba and Mist together? But it's that other piece of the coin, that growing TAM, that enormous TAM, where if you are going after the AI data center, how do you bring compute and storage, and with GreenLake together with networking? And that's where, if you look at the competition there, no one has that. No one has that full portfolio. So that's what excites me the most. I just, there's just so much opportunity there to go after that space.
Yeah, well, stay tuned for Discover.
Stay tuned for Discover. Great. So with that, we actually have Bob Friday coming up next. And it's great actually transition there, because Bob always says he doesn't want marketing, us, to get too far ahead of engineering. So Bob's going to have a chance to come in and talk about what we're doing on the self-driving network, where we are in the journey, and where we're going. So stay tuned for that. All right, that was an excellent overview of the self-driving network and how we deliver outcomes to our users, our partners, and our customers, right? But now really what I want to do right now is go behind the curtain here a little bit and talk about some of the technology behind the self-driving network. And I'm super excited to be here with Bob. Bob and I have been on a long journey going all the way back to airspace in the early 2000s, Mist and Juniper. And so, I always enjoy talking to you, Bob, about,
it is good to be here. Yeah, amazing adventure.
Yeah, exactly, in the journey. And actually, I keep using the word journey because I think, you always come on stage or always talk about how there's a journey to self-driving, right? This doesn't happen overnight. It's been ongoing, in our case, for over a decade. So why don't you talk a little bit about what that means and what are some of the stages that kind of goes into actually building a self-driving network?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you've always seen us, we've had the same journey slide for probably 8 years since we started Mist, because the foundation pillars.
The colors have changed when we went from Mist to Juniper to HPE, but.
But if you look at the pillars of, self-driving networking, the pillars have not changed since we started Mist, right? It started data, then we started to SLEs, user experience, started to efficacy and data science, and then we went into conversational interfaces, which is Agentic AI, and then finally into self-driving. And all those pillars led up, and we've been innovating across all those pillars for the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I think your main perspective is Agentic AI is really helping to go from like almost stage 4 to stage 5, right? Getting you out of the driver assist to the full autonomous mode. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the reasons I'm still here pushing the rock up the hill, because I now can taste that we are this close to getting this self-driving network on par with Waymo and Uber experience, right? Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things that are going to push us over the edge. One is this new Agentic AI technology, which is really just a nonlinear new programming language in the toolbox. And the other thing is being the Aruba Mist data science teams together. We now have the muscle.
And the data lake, right?
And the data lake, and bringing that together.
Yeah.
So between Agentic AI, new programming tool, and our new team, one roadmap, we have all the pieces now to push over the finish line.
I do want to double click on agentic, right? Because in the past, people always said, oh, there's AI washing. And I feel like right now there's agentic washing, right? Everyone's using the term agentic for everything under the sun right now. And I think that there's actually like key underpinning things that actually make something truly agentic, or at least agentic for self-driving, right? And I'm thinking, you talked about the data, some of the models, some of the autonomous and even the mesh capabilities. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what really makes an agentic framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is part of that journey we've been on, as I said before, because if you look at agentic AI, it's really a new way of APIs.
Yeah.
And the good news is HPE, Juniper Mist, we've always been very API first. And so we really had APIs you really need for great agentic framework. I would say the other thing, agentic AI is a new non-deterministic programming language. How you have to QA this new software is totally different than the old days. And that is where what we've been doing with customer support, we actually have the efficacy model in place to actually make sure that our agentic AI solution has efficacy both in our customer support teams and our SC.
And so by that you mean a trouble ticket comes in, our TAC takes it, moves it back to the model, make sure the model can answer it, and it keeps getting better, right?
Yeah, I mean, so we've been doing that since 2018, right?
Yeah.
For every ticket that comes in, we use Marvis to always answer that support ticket.
Yeah.
And that is really, when you build these agentic solutions, you need domain experts now to validate that that solution is actually getting better. So we've had that foundational element in place since 2018.
Yeah.
And the APIs are the same thing. If your APIs, just like I used to always say about, great wine starts with great grapes, great AI starts with great data, and great agentic AI starts with great APIs.
So is APIs still, the go forward terminology, or is it MCP or A to A, or do they all obviously work together, or
Well, I
how
think,
do you ensure that automation across different domains?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a whole new change in automation, right? In the previous days, it was all about IT teams learning Python so they could automate things through APIs. What we're seeing with agentic AI is really bringing democracy to APIs. You really don't need to understand the APIs because you're putting an MCP server on top of that
To help understand it for you.
And now automation is becoming a natural language exercise that almost anyone, even yourself.
I got my open cloud home. Do you have your open cloud home?
Yeah. Anyone else who can bring up an MCP server
can go
now's a
into it.
programmer.
Yeah. You mentioned the word models in there a little bit, and I hear a lot of talk around different models around. There's LEM for bringing in Zoom and Teams experiences. There's Shapley, some of the other models out there. Talk us through how do you differentiate with models, or how do you see models evolving in terms of what HPE is doing?
Yeah, I mean, so agentic AI is one form of AI, but we still have all the classic, supervised learning type, and that's where what we call the large experience model, where we're really taking Zoom, Teams data, and we're joining it with network data, where we can now actually predict the user experience. And that is that one pillar around the service level experience pillar of innovation, right? And that's really, that LEM is the next generation for finding the root cause to bad minutes. Because ultimately, we're trying to use simple math, fancy math, to figure out why is a user experience bad minutes being caused by.
Yep.
And that's why these models are still important. And that's not going to change with agentic AI. Those models actually require you to have access to both user experience data, network data, and join them.
And I think you brought up a key term here is experience data, right? And I think that's one of the other big differences with different agentic solutions, right? Is ours is primarily focused on collecting the right data for the user experience, moving into the right models for the user experience, and driving that. Whereas I think some of the others are still maybe focused a little bit more on the network level, or trying to bring that in. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I think that was one of the paradigm shifts, when we started MITS, right? It was really around recognizing that, in addition to managing network elements, yes, we have to keep AP, switches, and routers all up and running in green. It really was this client to cloud user experience, and that is where really that paradigm shift is still what other vendors have not really caught on to.
Yep.
Whether or not it's your problem or someone else's problem, the goal is to help that customer get to the
up is not the same as good. And,
I don't really care if it's my switch or someone else's switch.
Just
we need
fix
help.
it. Yeah.
We need to fix that problem.
Yeah, that's great. The other thing is, again, going back to the agentic washing a little bit, is I think autonomy, right? I think some folks or whatever are pitching this story, but there really is still a lot of human in the loop, right? An agent does something, a human internalizes it, moves it to another agent or whatever. So what does it really take to get an autonomous agent out there which can perceive and act and do everything you want in a trusted manner?
Yeah, and so this is kind of that open claw concept, right? Where we now have agents constantly monitoring the network and actually troubleshooting in this agentic graph. And that leads to that autonomy of, what does it take someone to trust to let an AI agent actually touch their network? And my usually analogy is, I think we've talked about this before, when you did your first Waymo Uber experience, something convinced you that it was okay.
Yeah, that it wouldn't take a left turn into traffic.
Yeah. You trust it to actually do that left turn or where it's going to drop you off. So I think that is where we are now in the networking space, and that's why I'm still here, is that I think we are on the verge now of being able to build solutions, that networking IT will trust to start
fully autonomous.
Fully start touching.
I think you had a mission you've challenged, like our product team, like something like you want 3-4 new autonomous features a quarter or something like that. And so, is that right?
Yeah, there's a combination of what I call speed and efficacy.
Yeah.
More than anything else, I want efficacy.
Yeah.
I want to make sure these are actions that
and how they
IT
trust it
and trust, right? And I think that is the first thing. And with Agentic, that's more about speed. We are now coding at a much different rate than we were 10 years ago.
Yeah. So maybe the final question here is, going back to 2015, 2016, you guys saw the shift to experience. We saw the shift to AI, ML being included, and even we're one of the first really implement the whole notion of agents, even though they weren't even called agents back then, with autonomous actions with things like Marvis Minis out there. What excites you? What's coming next? Where should we be kind of focusing our guns on going down the horizon?
Yeah, I think right now what got me most excited is trust. That we are now on the verge of actually building solutions that IT will trust to let run their network. That same experience that when you got in that Waymo, it was like a sci-fi movie, right? When you see these self-driving cars pulling up at the airport one after another, we're at that point there where we start seeing networks actually correcting and fixing Zoom, Teams calls automatically.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate you being here. Thank you guys for sitting on that. I think that was a great deep dive into the underpinnings behind how we do agentic AI and self-driving. Now stay tuned for Ben Baker. We're going to come up next and talk about how we apply this to the data center. Welcome back. Ben, I'm excited to be here with you. It's been, I think, a while since we've been on camera together or done one of these, so it's super exciting. Right?
Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So we're talking a lot about self-driving, right? And you obviously cover the data center area. Sometimes people push back and say, well, the data center, they don't really want to go self-driving. It's a little bit too much, dealing with the keys of the kingdom right there. Is self-driving real in the data center? Are people moving towards it?
It absolutely is, but let me start off by saying something that I hope isn't too controversial.
We wouldn't have had you on, Ben, if that's what was a worry.
AI does not solve all your problems.
Yeah, that's fair.
In the data center network, we start with our Apstra Data Center Director product.
Yep.
That is our intent-based networking for fabric management and automation. Intent-based networking is deterministic.
Yep.
AI is probabilistic.
Yeah, walk me through that a little bit. So we hear that a lot: deterministic, probabilistic, intent-based networking, AI ops. What's the difference, and what are each good for?
Very simple. If you're, I come to you and say, hey boss, I'm 98% sure about this switch configuration. Can I push it to production? You'd say, no way. You need a system that gives you 100% certainty.
Yep.
That pre-validates that change before it pushes out, and then continuously validates that the operational
state
trust.
It's a trust loop, and
of the network matches the intent that you created in the blueprint. That's intent-based networking. It's deterministic. It works fantastically well. Now, people talk a lot about vibe coding these days, and I admit a lot of these chatbots are getting really good at spitting back CLI commands in response to just simple natural language prompts.
Sure.
But we're not going for automating the CLI. HPE offers a completely new way for you to interact with your network, much simpler, much easier. Now, let's go to day 2, when that data center network is operating out in the wild.
Less deterministic, it's
unpredictable environment. Then, if I can tell you that with, and this is what AI does, with 98% probability this power supply is going to fail next week.
Yeah.
Then that's
Predictive,
great.
yeah.
Yes, because it's probably much better than what you have today, and that's the power of AI. So you put these two technologies together, deterministic intent-based networking plus probabilistic AI delivers this unbeatable experience to customers, both the network operators and the application end users.
Yeah. So when you are looking at the AI and looking at some of the predictive, are there actually autonomous actions that you can take in the data center to kind of prevent those problems from happening?
They absolutely are. But let me start with back to the self-driving network. So the journey starts, as you know, with the data.
Sure.
So our solution is built on top of a graph database. Graph databases capture and store information about the relationships among the nodes on a network. So for example, if a problem goes wrong, you have all these alarms coming in, but don't confuse those alarms, which are probably symptoms, with the root cause of the problem.
Sure.
Our system gives the operator context. That word context is very important. We understand the correlations among all of this disparate information that's being thrown at you.
It's not data, it's insight, right?
Exactly. Our customers, we find that they're drowning in data, but starved for insights.
Yeah.
So we're able to root cause that problem immediately, faster than anyone else can do, because we understand those correlations. So that's just the beginning. And then we layer AI into that, and then you start getting into application assurance, predictive analytics, service level expectations.
All the advanced capabilities. So you mentioned a key term there, correlation. And I think one of the things we always talk about when you're doing an end-to-end experience is correlation, not just within the data center, but also across some of the other areas, right? So if a Zoom call goes bad, yeah, it could be the wired, it could be the wireless, it could be the data center, it could be the server hosted, in a cloud, right? So what is the advantage, or how do we solve that by doing, not just within our own domain, but actually doing a broader picture here of event correlation and predictive analytics?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on there. So we did the initial integration with data center networking and Marvis Actions 2 or 3 years ago.
Yep.
And our existing Mist customers loved it. All of a sudden, they could see they had unified visibility and management. Including what they initially had, Wi-Fi and campus and branch. Now, oh wow, data center networking.
To that point, you mean there's like a single dashboard, some call it the octopus dashboard, the cup of coffee dashboard, where you can see your wired actions, your wireless actions, your data center, what you should do, and how to go fix it. I think that's what you're referring to there.
And I think the most interesting thing about this is something happened that we didn't anticipate. So this technology integration actually helped break down organizational silos at our customers. At a typical company, the IT and networking teams who operate campus and branch are usually different than the teams that operate data center. So it helped draw those two teams together, help them collaborate more.
Let me shift gears a little bit. So there's a new workload that's kind of coming to town that's kind of turning data centers on its head. We're talking AI, training, and inference, right? Just walk me through a little bit there. Like, what are some of the unique requirements to kind of support those use cases in the data center?
Yeah, when we think about these new AI data centers, we think of scale up, scale out, and scale across. So scale up, that's networking within a server or within a rack. The exciting news for us is the HPE AMD Helios rack.
Which was announced last December.
Yep, it's going to be available to customers by the end of this year.
Yep.
The interesting thing for me as a networking guy is this really effectively announces the arrival of Ethernet. Into the scale up domain. Up to this point, it's been dominated by proprietary technologies. So second, scale out. So this is networking within a data center.
Like compute platforms talking to each other within a data center.
Exactly. So we talk about AI training, like you said, AI inference. They have some different characteristics than traditional workloads, a little bit different requirements from each other too. The commonality is that the network is paramount to deliver that optimal experience. So performance, scale, low latency, low jitter are critical. If you're interacting with the Marvis Copilot, for example, you want that interaction to be just like you're talking to a human being. And as Marvis gets involved in these more agentic workflows, it's going out talking to other agents, it's querying different databases, different enterprise applications as it constructs the answers for you, then milliseconds really start to matter there. So, we have our QFX 5250 switch to help solve this problem. It's going to be available to customers in Q2 of this
Another
year.
one announced in Barcelona, now coming available. First with using the HPE liquid cooling, so lots of great things around that switch.
Exactly, yeah. 64 ports of 1.6 terabit per second Ethernet. Could talk about the speeds and feeds all day long, but I know we need to move on. To the last point, scale out.
Yeah.
So scale out is essentially networking between data centers.
Yep.
So HPE Juniper has dominated data center interconnect for the past 10 plus
with a
years.
routing solution, and we're going to be talking about that later.
Yeah, with PTX, MX, and QFX, scale across is essentially DCI for AI. So we're going to look forward to continuing our innovation and leadership as we help customers build out.
And when we're talking DCI, that's both for training, factories talking to each other, but also inference, right? Eventually, you want to push those models out to the edge so it's closer to the user and lower latency. So it's great we have all those solutions there. You touched on one thing, and this is maybe what we'll close on here is HP as a whole company, right? We're addressing the data center networking bit. Obviously, HP just bought Juniper to kind of bring a lot of what you just talked about in terms of the networking together with the compute, together with the storage, and together with some of the operational capabilities that they have. You've been on the forefront of this. You've been kind of leading a lot of that from a marketing standpoint, the cross BU integration stuff. Why don't you talk to that a little bit? What are some of the things we've announced, and how does that help the customer?
Yeah, it's been really exciting. We all thought we had the best networking portfolio on the planet as a separate company, but wow, with HPE, the technology synergies across the organizations, and what we've been able to execute on with product integrations in such a short amount of time has been incredible. I'll just highlight two examples in my world. So number one, integration with Apstra Data Center Director and Morpheus VM Essentials. This is going to be available to customers in Q3 of this year. So with this, we have the networking is aligned with the VMs. So as you're creating the VMs in Morpheus, you create the networking at the same time. You don't need to go to Apstra Data Center Director. It does its magic in the background. So it gives you that unified management of the two things. The network always follows the VM and vice versa, kind of thing. So secure networking too, of course. Second integration is our data center assurance product with OpsRamp.
Yep.
So, we talk about correlations before. This is correlations on steroids, right? So now we have cross-domain telemetry, storage, compute, networking, all in the same place, all the systems connected under the hood in the same place. There is not going to be a problem in your entire IT estate that we're not going to be able to find and root cause and fix quickly. So there's just two examples of what we call.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I know there's more coming at Discover and other stuff, but we're not going to talk about that now because I don't think we want to get in trouble as some marketing guys do. So, Ben, I appreciate that. This was great. Double clicking on the data center. Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Coming up next, we got Ed Chang, who's going to talk about wired access to complement what we just talked about on the data center switching side. All right, welcome back. Ed, I'm super excited to have you here. When we do all these webinars, we always focus on wireless. It's a tip of the spear. It's a big market. We have a huge advantage there. But wired is its cousin, its brother, right? I mean, when you look at the Magic Quadrant, it's wired and wireless LAN, right? So I'm super excited to have you here, and so thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So you've been in the switching space for a bit. So why don't we start a little bit on the hardware side? And I know this is near and dear to your heart a little bit. How have you seen the wired access switches evolve over the last years, especially coming into the AI era?
Well, Wi-Fi 7 is now very important and critical in the industry. And as we know, there's many devices now coming out with Wi-Fi 7. Experience is very high. Expectations are high, especially if you look at the new iPhone. So the switching themselves have evolved over time to support this new infrastructure. It's not only the switch hardware itself, which has to require a lot of PoE power to drive the power that's needed.
Yeah, new PoE standards as well, right? Yeah.
Exactly, new PoE standard, 90 watt is required, so that has to power the APs. And then also, we want to make sure there's no bottlenecks because user experience is very important. Lots of applications now being used on different clients. So both the uplinks and downlinks need to have high bandwidth. So what we try to do in switching is build high power switches, high power performance, and a lot of capacity into the switches to deliver the best experience.
Yeah, that's great. And we always like to say, we don't want to sell naked switches, right? And obviously, it's not because of revenue. We just want to bilk the customer. It's because there's actual value, operational value to bringing software and automation to a switch. Why don't you talk about that? What are some of the operational capabilities that we think our customers need to manage an access switch?
Yeah, the full stack is very important, both with the cloud managed, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
as well as the infrastructure. And self-driving outcomes is what customers want. They want the switches to provide the rich telemetry, the real-time data that feeds the AI engines that are hosted in the cloud. And then the cloud itself provides the automated operations, configuration, and troubleshooting to make the users experience better, as well as the network engineers sleep better at night.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there like telemetry and cloud. Are there some things you need to do to build into a switch to make them either cloud ready or better operational for this capability?
Yeah, certainly in the switch itself, the telemetry requires a lot of scale and capacity in the switch. So we, of course, build very robust hardware with lots of memory to keep track of all the data that's going through the switch itself. And then we need to make sure that we can feed it to the cloud. And the
In
cloud,
real time or
yeah, in real time or in some type of aggregated way so that we provide the right data for the cloud.
Yeah.
And the key is to provide the right data up to the cloud. So because the cloud is where the intelligence is where all the AI engines are that do the analysis and provide the outcomes for the user.
Yeah, and you got to do it with low latency. So we're talking about the self-driving era, the AI era.
Yes.
Switches, you have cables plugged in. So can you actually do self-driving actions on a switch? Like what are some of the things you can actually do and move into an autonomous mode?
Well, certainly the physical stuff, you need someone to plug in. That can't self-drive by
It could
itself.
be a robot at some point, so
Maybe in the
let's
future.
not discount that yet.
Maybe a humanoid in the future. But after the switch is connected, physically connected, then some of the self-driving operations, clearly the first provisioning of the switch itself, we want to make sure it's zero touch, so bringing up, after you physically connect, we don't want you to go in and configure all the switches by themselves. The self-driving will help you do that. And once you get the zero-touch switch connected to the self-driving engine, then it's all about providing the connectivity, because users need to connect.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that that's also self-driving to look at any connectivity issues. And we built a lot of that into the cloud now for these AI-driven outcomes.
Okay, and I've seen some of the autonomous, like fixing a bad VXLAN or something like that. What are some of the autonomous actions that you've seen coming out in Wired or that excites you?
Yeah, some of the main things are, if you look at the network end, the first thing is make sure the clients connect.
Sure.
So I want to make sure that's the first action. Then it goes into the security aspect. That's important. You mentioned Fabric, which is needed to segment the users.
Yeah.
But there's different types of users out there. There's corporate, there's guest, depending on the end customer. And want to make sure that each one of them get to the right resources or workloads that they're allowed to get to. So these self-driving actions also provide the segmentation, the role, the policy enforcement that's in the switch.
Okay, and I just want to double click on that section one more, and this is the last thing we'll probably get to right now is you talked about security, you talked about microsegmentation. Walk me through that a little bit on how has that evolved and maybe what are some of the unique things that we're doing to help deliver that solution in a scalable way.
Yeah, sure. It all starts with a zero trust framework. In our full stack architecture, not only in the cloud, but also in the switch itself. So on the switch, microsegmentation has evolved over time. We want to make sure that it scales with the VXLAN fabrics from small to large types of enterprise deployments so that we can make sure that we can handle lots and lots of end devices or however the customer wants to group or segment their networks. In the past, we've also had other capabilities where we do a centralized approach. We send all of this to wireless, the gateway, and all the enforcement is done there. So we have very flexible architectures, both in a centralized microsegmentation with the gateways, as well as a distributed VXLAN type of segmentation on the switches.
Yeah. Look, Ed, this is great. You've proven to me that I need to have you or have Wired in more of these events because there's a lot happening behind the scenes to deliver a better end user experience when wired and wireless are both working together. So thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate all the hard work on this.
Yeah, thank you. And I always like to say, behind every AP, there's a switch.
There's a lot of cabling that goes into wireless, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for joining this segment. Coming up next, we got Adam Fuas to talk about SD-WAN and Sassy. All right, welcome back. I'm excited to be here with an old friend, Adam. He doesn't look old, but for those that don't know, actually, Adam and I worked together 15 years ago at Silver Peak, right? So who would have thought that now together we're sitting here under the bright lights of HPE talking about SD-WAN and Sassy, going back to those old WAN optimization days. So thank you for joining me. I'm super excited that you're here. It's funny, this whole theme of this show or this webinar is all about self-driving. Right, and I know Silver Peak's been talking self-driving WANs for God knows how long, going back a long time. So I'd love to hear your take on it. How has self-driving evolved in SD-WAN and in your solutions over that time period?
Yeah, and it's funny. We actually used to say the SD and SD-WAN actually
Exactly
stood
right.
for self-driving.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know
That's
if
funny, yeah.
Did you coin that term
Yeah,
yourself?
I don't think I
Or you-
did.
okay.
We were WAN optimization one,
I know,
so I'll give credit to someone else for that one.
But yeah, so I mean, SD-WAN has been all about automation. So that was kind of the first step of self-driving. And what that meant for us when we started the SD-WAN solution back in, I think it was 2014, 2015, it was about how do we remove the need to go into individual devices to do configurations, and especially at scale. And so our SD-WAN solution, Edge Connect, which we launched, that was a solution that you could do intent-based policy on. And what this effectively means is that I go into one place, into the Edge Connect orchestrator, and in the orchestrator, I say, I want to configure this setting, I have QoS, or I have the way I want certain traffic to route across different sites. And that becomes policy within minutes across tens, hundreds, and for some of our customers, thousands of sites.
Sure.
And so that is something that in the old world would be a legacy configuration going site by site, device by device to do these things that a single operator can do within minutes. And I always tell people, and this is actually a true statement, if the devices are in place, like I myself could manage a 1,000-site network.
Yeah.
I can make these changes. And so that's I think, step one of self-driving. The kind of step two of this has been, how do we handle real-time events happening inside the network? And so what this meant for us for a long time was making sure that the devices themselves could react to changing network conditions. And so if a WAN circuit failed, right, could we make it so that the other circuit's up and running and ready to go and there's no impact to the end user? And so that was something that we absolutely executed on. I've had customers that forgot to set up monitoring that have actually received calls from the provider saying, we're so sorry about the outage. And the customer didn't even know.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Right?
Yeah.
So they hadn't been looking at it.
I'll take the credit, though.
Yeah, there you go, yeah. And so, I mean, that's the true beauty of self-driving is when it reacts and you don't have to do anything yourself. It's just working.
And I know also you guys have evolved over the years, or I guess we should, now that we're together. It's not just about network decisions, it's all about application and even like user experience to kind of determine that. So walk me through that a little bit, how you take those factors into consideration when you're doing some of the self-driving actions.
Yeah, I mean, so it's all about the end user experience at the end of the day, right? And so there's a multitude of SLAs that we can look at for the network itself, but also for the actual applications. And so one of the really interesting features in the Edge Connect solution is this feature called App Express. And what this allows you to do is to solve for one of the biggest problems that we hear from customers, which is my Teams traffic is not working, or my CEO was doing a video interview and it started to degrade, right? And the network looks like it's fine, but there's actually other problems occurring. And so we have the ability from an application perspective to look at what is the health of these connections from all the users inside the network, and what is the health of those connections through different paths. And if we observe that something is going wrong with a specific application that is mission critical, we can actually take that single application and we can treat it and move it somewhere else. And so for the CEO that's doing the video call to all of his employees, that might be fixed within a second and once again, not observed by the end user. And so these are all these kind of mini self-driving actions that are occurring throughout the software.
Yeah, it's funny, I came from the Mist world. And we always used to say, well, like when a Zoom call goes bad, the first thing they do is blame the Wi-Fi. But I think the WAN is probably equally blamed, right?
Absolutely.
It's not working. So being able to do that is super important. Which actually brings up an interesting concept, right? Of kind of even event correlation across domains, right? So it's not just WAN, but it's like wired, wireless, and WAN kind of working together and sharing information. What's kind of your guys' take on that, and kind of how do you see that evolving?
Incredibly important, and you kind of nailed it. Like we all get blamed for something.
Yeah.
The WAN.
We call it mean time to innocence.
Absolutely,
right?
yes. The WAN shares plenty of the blame. Don't worry, even though it's not always the point of the problem. And I know the Wi-Fi does also. So this kind of starts to trickle into what are we doing for cross-domain AI ops?
Yeah.
So there is Sassy Copilot, which is launching very soon on the Edge Connect solution, which will bring AI capabilities and AI ops capabilities into Edge Connect. And that's great. It's going to be great for troubleshooting that domain, right? But it might actually be a Wi-Fi problem or a switching problem or a firewall problem. How do I, as an end user, how do I look across all those things?
Yeah.
And so through some of the projects that we have right now, of bringing Edge Connect into Mist and into Central, we will gain these cross-domain AI ops capabilities. And so a user may come in and they say, oh man, my Zoom traffic's not working. They may go into a chatbot or into Marvis, right? And they may say, okay, let me look at Zoom. And it's going to be able to correlate on the WAN environment, on the wireless environment.
Correlate and predict and
Absolutely.
do all those amazing things, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And so you want to take AI out of the silo and get it into this cross-domain realm where somebody actually has observability across everything, and then it can actually help get to.
It's actually funny with this acquisition. It's like there's so much news on bringing Aruba and Mist together for wireless, or bringing data center together with servers and storage for that. But this is one of those areas that I feel is like kind of under the radar, but it's like one of the most impactful areas right now. It's like bringing a best-in-class WAN solution together with best-in-class wired and wireless and AI ops for that complete visibility. So I think that's super exciting.
And I think it's a huge competitive advantage for us as a company.
Absolutely,
because any company that offers just maybe a piece of this domain, they can only really observe just that one piece.
Yep.
We have the ability to observe everything.
And not just observe, but act, right? I always used to say there's those that watch and those that do, right? And you want to be in the do category because you're providing more value to your customers, and I think that's huge. The other area, I'm going to call you Mr. Convergence, because you're about like wireless and WAN convergence, you're about AI and networking convergence, but also security and networking convergence, right? It's like you're at the crossroads of everything right now. Obviously, that's an incredibly hot topic right there. So what's HPE's take on that, and kind of what are we doing to bring those worlds together a little bit?
Yeah, that would fall under the what we call integral security, right? And so I'm a firm believer in this. For a long time, when we built networks, we built the network and then we added security as a perimeter around it.
It was added, or
yeah, absolutely, it was an additive thing. And so I think that served a place in time, but it does not serve the current place in time. Security needs to be fully embedded into the network. And so when I'm configuring my network, I'm configuring security at the same time.
Is it the same person doing it, or different people, or?
It depends. Yeah. I think it depends. I think in some companies that it may have to be the same person because that's all that's available, and that needs to be as easy as possible for that person. But then in a larger company where that's owned in different areas, those people need access to those resources, but they all need to work together very nicely. Now on the SD-WAN and Sassy side, what we are doing is we are going towards unified Sassy, and so that trend is driving security and network together at the edge and at the endpoint. And so I think that is it's an early preview to what's going to happen to the rest of the network.
Yeah, and like I said, that's what gets me so excited is you got security coming together with networking, coming together with AI, right? And it's just, I think, it's super powerful, and I honestly think that there's no one more equipped with the tools in place to do that right now than HPE. So that's what makes me so excited. And I can tell there's excitement in your voice. As I said, I'm excited as well. There's a lot that's going to happen with us in terms of Sassy and driving the market forward and really driving value to our end users in terms of self-driving actions that really drive amazing WAN experiences, but also end-to-end experiences.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So coming up next, we actually have Raghu, who's going to actually have a little bit of a different spin on WAN. We're going to move from more of the WAN edge to more of WAN core with our WAN routing solution. So stay tuned for that. Welcome back, everybody. I'm excited for this section. I'm here with Raghu. Thanks for joining me. We're going to talk about WAN routing. We just talked about SD-WAN, Sassy, more of the edge routing. And I want to talk more about your domain, right? And why this is exciting for me is, again, I came from the Juniper world, as did you. That's the workhorse. Like, that's where Juniper really made its bones and came out. So why don't we start a little bit of, like, what are some of the main use cases that we're addressing with our WAN routing solution?
Yeah, so our WAN routing solution, our historically has been based on the edge and the core. And so we've started off with building routers for the core. We moved to the edge and access and aggregation. So today we have a portfolio that covers all of the aspects of the WAN, starting from the access all the way to the core. And we are also now building systems that help with DCI as well as AI WAN, which is the area that's
DCI
growing.
being data center interconnect. And you mentioned the AI a little bit there, some of the AI workloads. I know we're also talking to the data center folks and some of the unique requirements there, but would love to get your take a little bit on, what does that bring to the equation? Obviously, we need low latency, we need high throughput, need low loss. But talk me through how that's maybe changed the game on routing.
Yeah, AI workloads are no longer limited to a single data center.
Sure.
So now workloads are actually going across, so there is scale across, and that requires a robust WAN. And so what we are seeing now is a significant build out in terms of the WAN capacity that is needed to connect data centers.
Okay.
And so with AI workloads essentially going across data centers, the move is towards 800 gig as well as 1.6 terabit interfaces, and that's an insertion that the Juniper HPE is looking at to be able to kind of bring our WAN routing portfolio into that mix.
Okay, and got it. And also, I know with especially like training, there's connecting to the internet, and there's also edge on ramp types of. So it's not just a big PTX, DCI. There's also an edge on ramp.
That is correct. And so with a lot of the inference workloads moving towards the far edge, so we are seeing a need for AI workflows to be handled at the edge, where our MX is a perfect product.
Yep.
And that also brings in more of a need for us to be building systems that can go towards the far edge.
Got it. So this event is about self-driving. I want to get there in a second, but also I know, again, a lot of our heritage is in hardware. So I would love to get your take a little bit on some of the things that make our hardware great. Everything from like silicon diversity to sustainability. Give me the pitch real quick.
So we are one of the few vertically integrated providers of hardware in the WAN. So we build our own ASICs, we design our own hardware, and of course we have our Junos Evo operating system. What makes us unique is that we have two product lines for what we offer. We have the Trio line that focuses on the edge. It is the only programmable...
From a silicon standpoint.
From a silicon standpoint, yes. And it is the only programmable silicon in the market today. And that gives us the flexibility that our customers are looking at from an AI ramp point of view. And it scales in terms of number of tunnels. It's able to do a lot of stitching. It has huge amount of telemetry and counters. It's an ideal product for the WAN edge.
The MX.
The MX. And on the PTX front, it's based on our Express Silicon. We have built 5 generations of the Express Silicon. A lot of innovation has gone into these generations of ASIC, and where we really are exceptional is in areas of load balancing, which is very important in these days because a lot of the AI workloads are fat flows.
Yep.
And it's important for them to be able to efficiently load balance across their large networks.
Got it. So let's shift to operations a little bit. And again, I know a big focus for the routing infrastructure solution area has been around automation. What are some of the key things that can be automated? And also, how is AI now creeping in and kind of, especially Agentic, kind of changing the way that you guys are looking at things?
For the longest time, WAN networks, management in WAN networks was limited because we were not applying a lot of the AI capabilities. A lot of the advancements that we've seen in AI is now allowing us to ingest lots of data. WAN is all about a lot of data.
Sure.
It's also very dynamic. There's a lot of concurrency. And now being able to apply the newer AI models to that data set and being able to extract intelligent insights out of it is helping us move the needle when it comes to self-driving in WAN networks. And going forward, we see the WAN networks to be more autonomous. With the growth in AI, WAN networks are not only growing and becoming bigger, they also have to scale. And so in order to be now able to manage these networks, they can't be done manually anymore. Now we need a lot more autonomous management to come in place, where you not just look at insights, but then you also have remediation that can then be completely automated based on certain flows, certain workflows and controls that you put in place. So it's about being able to move from a model where you're focused more on insights to be able to now turn around and have automated actions based on trusted actions.
And you mentioned the insights. So I know we've launched things like MCP integration with third parties. I know we're also doing more to integrate with Marvis and some of the capabilities that come in with that. Talk me through that a little bit. Again, some of the agentic AI insight that we're deriving right now.
What we're seeing is a lot of enterprises, as well as some of our larger operators, are actually building out their own AI frameworks, their own AI models, as well as they have their own co-pilots. Now, for them to be able to efficiently use these technologies to manage their WAN networks, they need a mediation layer. And that's what we do. We provide Routing Director as a mediation layer that talks to the agentic frameworks that our customers bring to the table and translates what they need to what is relevant to the routing domain.
Okay. Thanks. That was a great overview of where we're going with our routing infrastructure solution, which, as I said, is the whole workhorse behind everything that we're doing in the HPE Networking BU. So thank you. Coming up next, stay tuned for some closing thoughts. Well, that's a wrap in terms of talking to all these industry experts. And I thought it was actually a fantastic way to double click on agentic AI and specifically how it's really delivering great experiences from client to cloud. What I thought was most interesting, though, is how this is real. This isn't a PowerPoint, this isn't a vision, this isn't a slide. This is something that everyone is using every day in various parts of the networks. As you saw, it was in the WAN, it's in the data center, it's in the access domain. Customers across all industries, retail, healthcare, hospitality, are really using autonomous actions today to drive more efficiency, to get cost savings, or to really just propel the business forward. So thank you for joining us. I hope you got as much out of it as I did, and stay tuned for the next event.